right, welcome back everyone to the Shock Absorber podcast. It is great to have you along with us, whether you are on your favourite podcast app or on YouTube. And I am joined by one guest. You say a regular guest?
You're
Joey.
Yeah. Popping in every now and then.
You are,
Yeah.
and popping on more and more often, which is great.
Yeah. Happy to join.
Thank you for coming on. I just realised that we are close to matching, but reversed. You're wearing a dark shirt. I've got dark shorts on, and then you've got green shorts on. I've got a green shirt on.
Yeah.
That's something I seem to do on this podcast a lot, which is talk about what other people are wearing.
Yeah.
Not intentionally. It's just a really good way to start the podcast. Well, I think it's a good way, and then I do it too often, and it's not that good. We always start every episode with a cultural artifact.
Yeah. You
had one, and that you actually used in a sermon.
Too. Yeah.
So
that's right.
Let us have it, because I'm interested to hear what it is.
Okay. I just recently, just in spare time, been watching the show Jack Reacher on Prime.
It's on Prime, isn't it?
It's on Prime.
I've seen the tile, but I have not watched it.
Yeah. I think it was one of those moments where I just wanted to watch something that didn't have to put too much thought into it.
Right.
Just kind of, there's a bit of action, there's a bit of kind of thriller kind of stuff in there.
So who is Jack Reacher, though? What does he do?
Who is he? He's like a...
So we should say spoiler alert, I suppose.
Well, I mean, his identity is not like that much of a spoiler, but he's a kind of ex-military guy, special investigations kind of division in army, and he's retired from that. He's a bit of a grifter, I suppose. He just kind of floats along in life now, city to city. But in this story, he comes across this really quiet rural town, and there's been a murder there. And so he kind of gets drawn into this kind of the conspiracy and all the stuff that's happening in that town.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's just in one town, basically?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, It's pretty much set in one town.
That's so funny, because when I look at as I said, I've only seen the tile, or even looked at the info, I feel like it's not in just one town.
I mean, he'll travel like to maybe one or two different destinations, but I guess the majority of it is kind of, kind of restricted to the people there, and it's hard to try not to spoil at the moment.
Oh, that's all right.
There is stuff that happens outside.
Yeah.
But I think the clever thing they've done is that it's kind of bounded by, this town and the characters. And
really?
Yeah.
There's a few of those shows around. I can't think of them exactly. I mean, what's the one with the zombies? I can't even remember it. Oh gosh, it's gone out of my head. Sorry, but there seems to be quite a few shows like that, and there's now like just bounded by one area. I mean, there's the classic Blue Heelers, which is like the most crime-ridden town you've ever been to.
That's a throwback. That's way back.
Yeah, it is. But that's the kind of country town that, it's not. It's limited to one area.
Yeah.
I suppose there's, Breaking Bad was kind of like that too. It was in a town in Arizona.
Yes.
And then similarly to Jack Reacher, expanded from that, I think. But I suppose it's a traditional storytelling technique, isn't it, to keep it to one area? Yeah. Oh, Last Stop Larimer was the show that Stu has brought on before, which is about. Yes. I think only 11 people live in the town, and they don't know who's committed the murder.
Yes.
But how did you use Jack Reacher in your sermon, though?
That's right. His main thing, as he kind of delves deeper into this kind of murder mystery, there's one point where he says, someone asks him, what are you going to do? Because something serious has happened that relates to him. And he has this kind of really poignant line. He's just like, payback, justice, and vengeance.
Ooh.
And that's, you're just like, bad stuff's about to go down. Like he's going to do some damage along the way of trying to solve this mystery. And I used that as kind of like just a bit of an illustration in my sermon at the end of 1 Samuel. We've been in that series. It's been a great series. But the fact that when something bad happens to the hero in 1 Samuel, which is David, but when something happens that's bad to someone you look up to, or someone that you think, they don't deserve it, then the very automatic reaction from our world and from us as well is kind of like we want payback, like we want justice to be served. But often we think, oh, like we need to take that into our own hands.
Yeah.
Or we would want that.
Yeah.
Like when Jack Reacher says that, you're like, yes,
Come,
go get him.
do it.
Like do it. But particularly David's example in 1 Samuel is not that. He actually does this reverse where he goes, I actually trust that God is going to carry out justice.
Yes.
I'm not going to get back at Saul, even though he's been hunting me down, chasing me around the wilderness in Israel. We, look at that story and go, he deserves it. Like David should get payback. He should just take Saul's life. But he doesn't. He holds back and he trusts God's sovereignty and his justice. And so it was just a bit of an illustration as to, our attitudes, but compared to David, this like God's chosen king, how does he respond in that situation?
And there's so many parallels of between David and Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely.
But obviously Jesus is far superior.
Yeah, yes.
But even the Jewish leaders at the time, when Jesus was there, they said, you're not the Messiah. Like they're expecting a Messiah who is going to be this warrior king, who's going to liberate them from the oppression of the Romans.
Yes.
And then it's like, and then he gets put on the cross by the Romans.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very similar, isn't it?
Yes, I think I actually, alluded to that point as well.
Oh, great, great
Points
sermon
us
link.
towards the great King, Christ, and how, he could have, at any point, kind of carried out justice in whatever ways. But
yes.
But he also trusted the will of the Father.
And there's a much greater plan at work rather than just liberating a town of whoever's like committed the murder.
That's right.
Yeah. No, that's interesting to think about. Did anyone have any interesting responses to you after your sermon? Like, did they talk to you about that?
Not particularly about that point. Yeah. I think some of the guys at our gathering appreciated the comment, I guess, of God being reminded that God is sovereign over all of this, like this kind of.
You need to be reminded that all the time.
Yeah. So I think that was the main thread of particularly that sermon. Towards the end, it was like 9 chapters that I had to cover. So we tried to condense it down. The main point is just God's kind of sovereignty over all that's happening there, even amongst the chaos. That He is sovereign over His people and His plan to deliver His people.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about in relation to, and I'm no expert in actually understanding this very well, but the Israel conflict. I've been trying to just do a little bit of research and understand it a bit more. And just trying to think, like, just feeling a bit helpless. I can't really do anything, but also just for the people in that scenario that are, innocent civilians being killed, either side. And then also, Stu got us onto from his sermon last week, YouTube channel of Sergio and Rhoda, and they live in Israel, but Sergio is a Jewish man, and Rhoda is an Arab woman.
Sure, yeah.
And it's really, but they're both Christians.
Yeah, wow.
And so there was a great, they flew back into Israel, and they said how crazy it was that there's only one airline that's currently flying into Israel.
Yeah.
And they said that it's been given us insurance backing by the Israeli government of $6 billion in case anything happens. Yeah. But apparently there has been scenarios where people have been flying in on commercial flights and seeing rockets flying in the distance. Wow. Like, it's just insane.
Wow.
But it's really encouraging hearing them talk about it. It's like, we just prayed and trusted that God would look after us. And both their families, a Jewish family and an Arab family, have come together. And it's because of Jesus. And that's what's really cool about it. And in relation to that as well, I was reading Psalm 46 just a few days ago, and it says from verse 8 onwards, it says, "Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations He has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shield with fire. He says, 'Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. I think it just plays into that fact of people that you spoke to saying that we just need to be reminded of God's sovereignty so often. I do personally, and I think other people are much better than me at remembering that, but it's very, very important. So it's imperative that we continue to remember. I just looked at a sign here where we're in a congregational church, and it says, "My grace is sufficient for you." Too, and it's like, yes, you are enough, God. Just maybe that's a bunch of random thoughts, but you talking about that is what really reminded me to do that. One of the reasons we thought we'd get on the mics today and record was talking about your experience of finishing college recently. One question I wanted to ask in relation to you preaching about God's sovereignty and Jack Reacher was how much do you think that your preaching has changed just in how long have you been doing it for? It must be just over a year.
Yeah, a year and a bit. So coming out of college, I think last year, just as I joined the church plant, it's starting to preach maybe once every fortnight. Yes. Oh no, maybe it was a bit less than that. Yep. Once every 3 weeks or so. And then this year it's transitioned into it was a fortnight, and then there was a term where I think all the pastors were a bit busy, so I think I was doing like maybe 3 a month, and then it kind of settled back down to preaching fortnightly.
The reason I ask is because I'm really always interested in people's process. So where I was going to try and lead you to is like, how has your process changed, and how has your preaching changed even since you started doing it?
Oh heaps. Like I
that's
think
what's interesting, right?
It feels like I think often I'm tempted to like make changes like almost every week.
Okay.
But I think along the way I've learned, sometimes you just got to let the process kind of work and make one change, test it for a bit. It's almost a bit like Stu's thing of like that iterative process of learning, trying something. And there were some very consistent and kind of foundational things learned at college that kind of set you up to begin that process of preparation and preaching. But kind of going into the ministry, into a church plant, where there has been lots of change happening, lots of ambiguity, and having to make changes on the fly. That process has changed maybe every month or so. I'll make like some small changes to my prep just to try and refine things, be more efficient with some of my time.
What's an example of that?
So I think as a kind of recovering perfectionist, like there's always been temptation to overspend time in certain areas, maybe in the area of interpreting exegesis, understanding the passage, trying to like get everything like kind of perfect, right in that sense, which you can never really do, but you're just really keen to get the message right, the content right. And that's really important. I think at Soulies we all really want to do that. But I think being just able to give myself a set time to go, okay, that's enough. You've done work. You've worked hard on the translation stuff of at the original languages, at trying to understand the text well. Let's move on from that. So we kind of knew that. I knew that in theory that might be a problem, particularly when I was in college. Kind of just week in, week off, every fortnight, doing the prep and getting stuck in certain places. But then when you actually get into the rhythms of church and the reality of it, I still got stuck. Like I knew the theory, I still got stuck in certain moments.
Right.
And so that kind of affects the rest of your week, your time you spent in other areas of the ministry. I think every few months I'll kind of just have a look at it, look at my process. Am I getting bogged down in certain areas? Just even how much time I spend on sometimes translation or laboring over like a structure of a sermon. It's really kind of those detail things. They're good, but sometimes I think I get stuck in those. Yeah.
What do you think revealed to you that you might have been spending a bit too much time on it? Was that actually preaching and going, oh, I shouldn't have spent so much time on this, or was it something else?
Sometimes it was just feeling like, oh, I probably would have liked to have spent this time in the afternoon. Maybe I could have met up with someone, and maybe I ended up feeling like, oh, I need to spend a bit more time on my sermon, but yeah, it's kind of that balance of, well, I'm pastoring these guys here at Soul Revival and Ryde, and part of that is meeting up with them, reading the Bible with them, chatting with them, praying with them. And so, yeah, I think there have been moments throughout the years where, like, there's the imbalance of how much time I'm spending here. Sometimes it's been because I've tried to cram in like a meetup with someone.
Yep.
Anyway, but then the sermon prep just gets getting pushed, and I'm scrambling at the end to kind of, when it gets to Saturday night, I'm like, I've just finished. I haven't had time to kind of go through it again or something like that.
Yep.
So, yeah, there's those moments that kind of act as flags, warning lights to kind of go, oh, you need to, take better care of how you're using your time throughout the week.
And just structure it a little bit better.
Structure a bit better, yeah. Be a bit more disciplined. Yeah.
What about getting up in front of people? Is that something that you did regularly?
At college or
anywhere? Yeah, any beforehand. Because the reason I'm asking, I should say, I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy.
Sure.
And they say you need to, if you're going to do it, and I haven't done it.
Sure.
But they say you need to get up on stage multiple nights a week and just keep going and be terrible for a long time. Yeah,
I've heard that too.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, is it a similar thing that it is just a matter of getting the reps in up front in front of people? I remember having a similar conversation with Jai, one of our other pastors.
Yeah.
And I was there for his first ever sermon that he preached.
Yeah.
And he was extremely nervous. And because he wanted to do a good job. And it's similar to you, where you're saying you think you might have been over preparing a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
Is it really is just rooted in the fact that you want to do a good job?
Yeah.
But I think it is. But sometimes it can be too much perfectionism in the way of good.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So then how do you think it's changed of you getting up almost every single week and preaching God's word? How do you think that's made you different as a preacher?
Yeah. It's a great question. And particularly at the beginning, there's a lot of nervousness. I mean, that getting it right in front of the congregation and in front of the church, I mean, part of that is also linked personally sometimes with there can be people-pleasing tendencies, kind of a fear of man, like what they're going to think about your sermon, how they'll judge your sermon.
What do they think of me after this?
It becomes a bit personal, and I think a big battle probably for most like young preachers coming out, I've heard is like you have to fight that tendency. You have to fear God above fearing man, about what others are going to think. And so I think that's part of it. That's been a struggle. I think there are links to like that stand-up kind of comedy kind of thing where you almost have to play the long game. So I'm actually a big fan of like the stand-up comedy stuff as well. And often, they have to they have to play the long game. They have to go, what I'm doing is like, that was really difficult, or that was terrible. Like that last.
You have to bomb, they say.
But almost go, that's part of the process. I think for the preacher, which is in some ways similar, but also very different from the stand-up comedy, is seeking to be faithful, knowing that the communication does matter, like getting that message across in a way that serves people, is thoughtful and persuasive in terms of God's word and what it has to say to them. just constantly having that in the back of your mind, even when you go, oh, I didn't think that was a great sermon, or I was too nervous, or I don't know if I spoke so well or eloquently about that. I think having those kind of dual goals, kind of being faithful and knowing that you're not straight away going to be, for most people, the most gifted communicator.
Yes.
But playing the long game. That's, I think, what I've been trying to hold together and remember. Yeah.
Do you think you're better on your feet now, though? Like if you maybe go off on a slight tangent, you're better at bringing it back to the point?
Slightly. I think, I don't think I've ever been that gifted on just thinking on my feet and just being able to riff, or not riff in a sermon, but I kind of go on a tangent and speak so spontaneously. So I think there are moments where I've been able to share just something that's just come up quite briefly. But I don't do it often. I think I'm better when I've just been able to put some thought into a scripted sermon.
Yeah.
Able to communicate. Yeah.
Well, I think about just even with podcasting.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, I've done probably more than 200 episodes across the Shock Absorber and Chip Lunch. It'd be close to that.
Yeah.
And how much better I am at just being relaxed.
So
therefore, I'm better at asking questions or just continuing a point or anything like that. And there was a time, I actually remember there was a time when we're doing our digital services and we're doing a Shock Absorber and a Chip Lunch, I was basically doing 4 podcasts in a day.
Yeah, it was just happening regularly.
And it was like, I was exhausted by the end of the day, but I was like, man, I really enjoy doing this.
Yes.
But the other thing was, we did a Shock Absorber conference that was completely online. And I realized at the time, and I was hosting it, and I was talking to, I think it might have been Stu and Jai, who were on the panel with me at the time. But I realized afterwards that I was talking about something while thinking about something else different. And I think that's as a result of a lot of repetitions of doing it. And I think about that also because I think Stu is exceptional at this. I think because he's probably done more than 1,000 Bible talk sermons than far more than we've ever even heard, let alone spoken. So I think, I suppose to encourage you that I think it's going to keep improving as you keep doing it.
Brother.
And I suppose it's also something that probably people that are listening to this podcast, who maybe even just started on their ministry journey like you have, to hear it and go, oh, okay, I don't have to be perfect. Because I heard this, there's a podcast I listen to called Modern Wisdom, and the host Chris Williamson was talking, I think it might have been an episode with Jordan Peterson, and he was talking about, we spend so much time, even something that we want to do, whether it's preaching, stand-up, like we've talked about, music, we spend so much time looking at the best in the field. And we don't realize the amount of repetitions and hours that those people have put in to get to that point. Now, talent, I think, plays a part, and ability, but then also just like Stu, is the thousands and thousands of times of doing it that has made them that level. But we, at this point, like 2 years out of college, for example, 200 episodes into a podcast, we compare ourselves to the person that's done 1,000.
You see the person in front of you and you're like,
I'm never going to get there. I'm like, but that person has done like a multitude more of what you're actually trying to do. And the pool of like that you're comparing yourself to is far higher than you actually, like your peers that have started around the same time or trying to do the same thing. So I think that's always something probably to keep in mind too. That and I do that. Like, I'm very comparative. Like, I love this thing. I want to do this. This is where heaps good. And you like, it's nowhere near as good as this. I'm like, but that's because again, like this Chris Williamson on Modern Wisdom has done 700 plus episodes. So of course he's going to be way better at it. Anyway,
that's really good.
What is it like? Moving on. What's it like? You've come out of college, and I think we talked about it a few, like maybe the last time you're on. But I'd love, again, one of the reasons that we do the Shock Absorber is for other people on their different ministry paths and journeys, just to have a conversation about things. And I think one of the cool things about having you on is that you're at a different position that even Tim or me or Stu are on. So I'd like to get your personal reflection of coming out of college, being thrown into a church plant, and a very much a just establishing church plant as well. I feel like that's not an experience a lot of college graduates would have.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I'm sure you've got some friends there that you've graduated with that may have just gone into other roles.
Sure.
How does your experience, you think, compare to those guys?
Yeah. I think you're right. Like for most of my peers, they like some we're definitely thinking about church planting or are moving in that direction. But for the most part, most of them have gone into kind of larger teams and churches where they've got a more maybe specific kind of role in a certain area of ministry as a pastor, and it means that they get to focus on that a bit more, just kind of learn the ropes in that area before moving to other stuff. I feel like going into this church plant for me has been there's just like it's like everywhere. Like,
well, it's like we're a church plant and Ryde is a church plant.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, it's been a great blessing actually, though, to be part of this larger staff team, and the model that we have of this hub and spoke model has been a blessing, so that I can continue being part of a wider team.
Right. Instead of just siloed on your own.
That's right. Yeah. And that's been hugely encouraging. Kind of hang out with stuff on Fridays. I mean, one big difference I think for my peers is on that preaching front. Actually, I think I'm preaching more regularly. Probably just more of that repetition happening than most of my other peers. Yeah, because they have more specific roles. They're preaching throughout the year. Yeah, but I think I'm getting more
reps,
more reps, more chances to test things, more chances to fail, and more chance to learn. And so that's been really cool. And like we were talking about, I think that's that will be a good thing for my preaching as I keep learning.
I think so too.
Yeah, that's been a difference.
Right. And what about coming to Soul Revival Church too? I feel like, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like that was maybe not what you were planning originally to be. Is like, first of all, church plant, but I think I don't want to sound arrogant here, but we like to do church a little bit differently, and that's not compromising the anything to do with the gospel or the word of God.
Sure,
But we like to try and think it through different. How do we do it differently so that we can bring more glory to God?
Yeah.
How's that been for you, adapting to that?
Yeah. Well, I think surprisingly, it hasn't been so big a leap.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of, the church plant aspect. So that's the first part. Yeah, that was very different. Wasn't what I had in mind. I think a more standard pathway is joining that bigger church.
And an assistant minister.
And I mean, I'm still an assistant minister, but I think just it's so different being on the ground, the only pastor on the ground in Ryde. But yeah, still kind of being assisting Stu as my boss, as my rector, and working alongside him, but it's a little different. So yeah, it wasn't what I expected, but just how it came about in funny ways of through friendships, through kind of, I guess, a network of and past ministry experiences.
Yeah, because correct me if I'm wrong, but Ian is the one who suggested. Ian and Grace, who were at Ryde, suggested this. But you were Ian's leader at some point?
No, he was my youth leader.
No, he was your youth leader.
When I was in high school.
Oh, really? Yeah, so that's cool.
Yeah. So, wonderful kind of friendship there. And then I guess as I came out of, like, when I was in university, university and started working, we'd actually lead together at church. And
cool.
different Bible studies and stuff like that. So and also Grace came from our church as well.
Yes.
Our previous church. So we kind of knew of each other, and we knew that we were really involved in our different respective ministries. She was more so in the Mandarin congregation, but just quite involved and wanting to see the gospel work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grace is always very involved in many things.
Yeah, so many things. Yeah. So yeah, that was, it was different, but it was also kind of an exciting kind of experiment, and because of those friendships, being able to go, oh, okay, yeah, like there's potential in this to happen, for us to plant and to see what we can do.
Something I appreciate about you is that you think about things really deeply, and even you can see that when, you know, I ask you a question, you're like, I want to make this response very clear. So coming into a church plant of a church plant,
Sure,
as we said, a lot of ambiguity. How has that been for you personally? And you talked about like being a recovering perfectionist as well.
Yeah.
How has that been? Like, I really think you've had to adapt to a lot of new things all in 1 year, plus having a young family. How's that? How have you approached that? And I'm guessing that you found it maybe a bit hard to begin with, but I feel like I've observed in you becoming more able to deal with it. What do you think of those things that have helped you improve that, and how do you approach ambiguity? Because the reason I'm asking that question is, again, people that listen to this may be thinking about starting a church plant, or church plant's coming and they're getting preparing for it. There's going to be a lot of ambiguity. What's your recommendations for it?
Oh, there's so much there.
Is that an ambiguous question?
It's an ambiguous question. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just it's not an ambiguous question. It's more that there's just so much, I think, that perhaps I've gone through, and I'm just thinking on my feet now of like what are some of the key things that I've had to keep in mind. So, in no particular order, I think what's really come out of, particularly in this kind of, in such an ambiguous environment, a lot of change, a lot of pivoting when things haven't worked, and being okay with that, or learning to be okay with a lot of that. I think just this thing that keeps coming up is faithfulness for me personally, and that I need to be kind of responsible for what I can do, because there are so many things in that ambiguous space of church planting where it can be, you can get quite anxious about it or stressed out, like what is the future going to hold, like what are we going to do, what's the next steps,
trying to control it,
and trying to control those things, and so it can be easily overwhelming at times. And I think in those moments I've had to go, well, like what is your current just capacity at the moment? What are the things that are core to your responsibility as a pastor, as a shepherd of this flock in Ryde, particularly, and just try and hone down on those things again. What's God calling me to be faithful in terms of my family as well? And then that's been really core to not let all those things that need to be done or need to be thought about kind of creep into time with family life. Particularly like when I go home at night, to just the usual things of just trying to be present, even if I have designated this time, like this is family time, this is time with my wife, with the kids, there's that step. Then there's a step of, I could still be thinking about like all that stuff, even as I'm going. And so I think I've had to fight really hard. Sometimes haven't been able to do that well, but keeping that as one of the really key things, like so faithfulness in terms of just being a husband and father at home. There's been I think in those kind of overwhelming moments as well, just when thinking about the mission field that's out there in Meadowbank and Ryde South, it's going, how are we going to reach like these people? They need, we have such a heart for the lost there. They need Jesus. and going, wow, that's like, how are we going to think about the strategy and the tactics to kind of get out there? I think in the more overwhelming moments, I've also had to go, oh, but also like, don't forget the people in front of you that God has given, our team, our launch team, who gather there regularly every Saturday. Like, don't forget them. Like, be faithful in seeing them grow in their love for Jesus, their maturity in Christ. So I think that's also another thing that's been really impressed upon me, I think.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting? And we talked about earlier about, my grace is sufficient for you, and, God's sovereignty, and how we, again, constantly need to be reminded it's God's work, not ours. And I fall into this trap all the time of trying to control what I'm doing. If I just do more of this, then it'll all work in many areas of my life.
Yeah.
And it kind of sounds like maybe it's sometimes a little bit similar for you, the over-preparingness with sermons and things like that. And I don't mean that to give you a hard time, because I do exactly the same thing. And, and I think sometimes I lack faithfulness, exactly what you're saying. And again, the reminder, it's been probably a growth thing for me this year of, I got to be more faithful. I'm getting better, but there's so much more room left in that. That we're.
What are some things that have kind of that you've been able to identify to help you?
That's an interesting question. I like that you're asking me questions. That's cool.
I just gonna switch roles for a sec.
No, that's fine. I think I've always been prone to anxiety. In lots of things. I've been thinking about my relationship with my wife, just my kids, just my situation. I don't think I noticed how bad my anxiety was until I had a real moment where it got pretty bad. And since then, I've been able to recognize when it's happening, and I can deal with it better. But I think that was kind of like a psychological, and I think God really answered my prayers. I'm like, what am I doing here? God really answered my prayers of helping me calm that down in a psychological sense. And I think what I wasn't doing, though, was having enough faith in God that He would take care of it. And often it's like, no, I'll take care of it. I'll be able to do this. If I just do more, if I just plan this better, if I just structure it better, if I just do all this, I'll take care of it. And I wonder if that's perhaps being raised in a non-Christian home as well. Like, that would have been that could have been part of it too. So I'm thankful again that, like, for my kids to be raised in a Christian home, that we can go, well, I mean, I had a conversation with my son. It's like, mate, whether it's going to be, this might be hard, you might not enjoy it, but you know that God's got you, and He's got it handled. And to just to be able to relay that to my son, whereas like maybe I didn't have that to a degree, then I think that's a big part of it too. So there's just some things I've been thinking about. I think also we mentioned Psalms before. I've been reading Psalms for the last a month and a half, something like that. And I think whoever is writing it, it's like, oh my God, like they're just like, my enemies are against me. There's nothing else that I can rely on. I think that's helping me a lot with my faithfulness too, because there's a lot of that obviously in the Old Testament, and I probably would say I've read much more of the New Testament than the Old Testament. But what I've enjoyed is pairing the two together recently. So I'll read one Psalm, and I'll read I'm currently reading 1 Peter.
Oh, so good.
But I think that's I've gone through lots of different ways of trying to read the Bible and stuff. That rhythm has been really nice for me lately and really helpful, and I've been feeling a lot more peace as well, just in terms of knowing God's in control. I can be peaceful and stuff, but I found, and you might be the same, is that when I find that peace, I almost can do more. I don't know if that's the same for you, but it's like you're saying, not worrying about the things you can't control. I can control my actions and how I think about things and rely on God, but I can't control what other people are going to do. I can't control how God's going to work with these people in Meadowbank and Ryde. But I can ask Him to go, what do you want me to do?
Yeah, I think that's yeah, absolutely agree. I think that's like asking him, and that act of prayer.
Yes.
I think that has been also a huge lesson in reality, in practice of the church plant, of just going, personally for me. And I think what the core team and the launch team have been trying to lead them towards and do together is to be prayerful, like in that dependence, in that relying on God aspect, when things do feel like, wow, such a huge mission field, there seems like there's heaps to do, to go, oh yeah, let's bring that before God first. Yeah, and to be prayerful about that. I think like earlier this year finished a kind of small book on prayer by Michael Reeves, and he kind of reminded me of a quote from the reformer John Calvin. He says that prayer actually is the exercise of faith.
I was just thinking that too.
So that faithfulness aspect that we've been talking about.
That quote from Calvin makes me think, if I am struggling with my prayer life, that means I'm probably trying to control too much. I think that's what I've realized recently. And I'm trying to build prayer into my life a lot more again. Usually when I try and go for a walk at lunchtime at my other job, and it's nice. There's a I walk along this like mangrove area, but it's like a full-on path that they've constructed and stuff. So it's great. It's perfect for that. And there's not many people around, so you just like kind of walking in creation a fair bit, and just going, oh yeah, God, thank you for this. And then I'll go, it's just like, when Jesus says like, my come to me who are weary and burdened, my yoke is light. And that, I think prayer is a big part of that, isn't it? Like, and again, it's putting faithfulness in God. Yeah, that's cool. I got another question for you that you kind of mentioned it just before we started recording, is that you coming into being, as we said again, a church plant and a church plant, grappling with the ideas of the shock absorber and kind of what we see as theology, strategy, and practice. Tell me what that's been like for you. Because even other college graduates are going to come into a church where there may or may not be that kind of framework to how we think about and do church. So what's it been like for you? Were you expecting it?
Like I think what I was pleasantly surprised by was how it had been articulated. I think I mentioned to Stu previously that one of the real gifts, one of the great things that he's done is articulated quite clearly the strategy, the theology, strategy, and practice for Soulies, and because of that clarity and that articulation of it, like it allows everyone, then the whole church, to kind of go, oh yeah, like that's where we want to head towards as we partner alongside Jesus to do this work. So I think kind of going back around to kind of one of the questions you were asking, actually, was it didn't seem like that big a jump for me conceptually when I came out of college, because a lot of the things of the shock absorber and also of kind of intergenerational ministry, kind of the community, the tight-knit friendship community, a lot of that I think I had experienced, even though it may not have been articulated so clearly, had experienced even from my previous church. So there's some cultural aspects of that growing up in a Chinese Australian kind of church, very kind of communal, kind of family-oriented church. And so coming in out of college, having chats with Stu about the potential of this church plant, whether I was a good fit for that. I think that was really important actually for Stu, like for both of us, to be able to go, do we understand each other's visions for ministry, for what the church under Jesus could look like, what that community could look like as well. That was really important. And I think Stu, particularly as the rector was very much like that, and that's why the first year it was almost a kind of a year of almost a year of apprenticeship, actually, kind of understanding the DNA of Sully's, kind of the way that Stu was thinking about ministry in the church. Yeah. But yeah, him being able to articulate that, I think, was helpful for me to understand, to go, oh yeah, I'm on board with this. Or yeah, these are some things I have questions about. So let's talk more about it. Yeah.
Do you continue to kind of grapple with some things or not? Which is okay, by the way.
Yeah.
I hope to say that I think we're all pretty aligned as a staff.
Yeah.
But we're all going to have our own little bits and pieces to figure out.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. Yeah. I think what I was trying to think about then was the core things. Actually, I'm 100% on board with the theology, the strategy, and even the practice of how I've seen it work out in Kirrawee in the Shire. Yeah, I'm like, wow, that's amazing what God has been doing through Solis. What I was trying to kind of just put together just then was, because we're in Ryde, the difference of Ryde and the Shire.
Yeah, yep. So very different context, isn't it? Very different demographics and things like that.
Yeah. And so the practice then will, I think, in some areas will shift, will change. How you think about perhaps the more practice oriented, the details of practice might change in terms of for how you reach, a Ryde community. Yeah. And so I think that's been the conversation for us, is as we keep the core things core, the theology, the strategy, that we want to share the truth and love of Jesus with everyone, all age, all stage, to everyone, everywhere, and with the focus of this intergenerational church, doing it with such a huge emphasis on our friendships together in community. They're wonderful, and we're just trying to figure out, how does that look different, or does that look the same in Ryde? What are the nuances of that when we gather together on the Saturday night in Ryde? And I think that's been a fruitful conversation. Yeah, but the core things, I think, been really on board with, really encouraged by.
Okay, that's cool. Well, I can understand why you're grappling with that though, because Soul Revival's ministry has only been based in a context in the Sutherland Shire before. So then when we plant in Ryde with you and the team, it's it's going to be a lot of experimentation, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you think? Is there anything you can think of that may have worked well in the Shire but doesn't work well in your area, or vice versa? And because when I come to Ryde, which sadly I don't get to go as often as I'd like to, I still feel when I walk into Soul Revival Ryde, I still feel like it's Soul Revival. Because again, of those things, the theology, strategy, and practice are all the same. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, and it's probably on the practice end, isn't it?
Likely that.
What, anything that you can think of that's different or that works differently?
I think, this is purely just based on kind of me observing, and before coming to join Solis, I don't think I'd been to the Shire much at all, growing up. So it has been really kind of cool just to, come down here, be part of the team, but also just see how the difference in how people live and community, what community looks like.
Yeah, I could say the same thing about Ryde.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I do often wonder, and still kind of a work in progress, but just wonder how much, in terms of the Shire, like often people will say like we're kind of like, you kind of stay in the Shire, like you grow up here, and you might buy here and live here. Sometimes work is still here, although I'm sure people travel out. I do wonder how much that effect has had in terms of you kind of growing up within this bounded space, actually, in the Shire.
Yeah, there's a reason they call it the Insular Peninsula.
Sutherland Peninsula, yeah. But the relationships then are quite close, and you kind of know a lot of people. You've grown up with a lot of people.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
And because of that really good emphasis of the friendship community, and being able to invite your friends into this community, I wonder whether the Shire has been a very particular kind of pocket of Sydney that is able to that lends itself well to doing that, because you've kind of grown up a lot, like and you stay together within. I mean, the Shire is pretty big, but it's still it's in this area. And I wonder how much of that is the same for Ryde. Yeah. Whether, I grew up actually in West Ryde.
Yep.
From primary school onwards. And the sense of kind of being in Ryde, I don't know how much that was apparent to me or there when I was growing up. I feel like people, they would go to schools outside of Ryde.
Oh, okay.
They would travel, and they would, when they moved, there wasn't a huge attachment to Ryde. They'd kind of buy somewhere else or move somewhere else or rent somewhere else.
So more transient.
Yeah. And particularly in Meadowbank, I think it's fair to say it's a bit of a kind of dormitory suburb. People live there, but they go out to play and they go out to work.
Oh, it's different, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's more unit blocks, for example. Right?
Correct. The density of apartments is just massive.
Yeah.
So, but they go out to even outside to shop. Yeah, even for their groceries, they'll go out to West Ryde because there's more of a kind of marketplace and a bit of more of a village there, more place to eat in West Ryde rather than stay in Meadowbank.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, even in that space, it's quite interesting to think about, what, the differences between.
That's really interesting.
Shire and Ryde. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned the thing about West Ryde being a bit more villagey aspect. It's how much for want of a better word, the architecture of living, high-rise living, how that changes how you live outside of that place rather than living in a house where a lot of people do in the Shire, for example.
Yeah, right.
So that would change a lot. I mean, I'm trying to think of ideas, but it's probably not the right time to do it, though. But we'll leave it on there because what we might do is that you've presented those kind of challenges that you have. And in a couple of months or in a month or so, we can hear about how that's changed and what you've kind of been adapting to as a church plant.
Yeah. Sure.
Just to finish, I suppose, I just want to let you know that it's really cool to have you on because I think you've been really genuine and authentic. And I think that's, again, one of the reasons that I've said we do this podcast is to have a conversation about anything related to church.
Yeah.
And I think the more authentic and genuine it is, the better conversation it is. So then we can have, the better conversations are, the more impact we can have on our thinking or how we do things or anything in regards to, we talked about having faithfulness in God and knowing that impacts everything that we do.
Yeah.
So, just wanted to say thanks for coming on. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. But the thing is that before you was like, I'm not sure how I'm going to go. And then we've just done this whole podcast and it's been great. So I think you sell yourself a bit short there because I think, and I bet you it's the same with more podcasts you do, you get better. That's the same with your preaching and all that thing. But it's been really fun having you on. Yeah. And thank you very much. Yeah, and thank you to everyone listening or watching. Yeah. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions for Joey or myself, you can email them to me at joel@shockabsorber.com.au and we can definitely bring them on the podcast. We've had a few people contact us in regards to listening to the Shock Absorber, which is amazing. That was the whole point. It was just to have more conversations and more one-on-one conversations from it. So that's been unreal. But as always, we'll say thank you again to the audience. Thank you again to Joey. And, of course, thank you to Jesus. And we'll finish with a one-way.
Yeah. All right.